Hello, this is a new type of video on this channel. So I'm going to, in this video, from the description and the title, I'm going to kind of go over the publication history of Frank Baum's Oz book series. So the first one was published in 1900, and the series lasted until the final publication. The last book was 1919, and he did a few other things in between there. A comic strip, a Wogglebug book, the Little Wizard stories, other things cut through the time. He did other novels and other series that connect into the Oz books. He created his own interconnected universe long before any other storytellers were doing it. We still see that with the Marvel movies. So they put a little nod in Infinity War. Not a lot of people noticed it, but if you've seen the Marvel movie Infinity War, within the beginning of the movie, like first 10 minutes, a character called the Ebony Maw is talking about Thanos and describes himself as my humble personage, and the word personage, and is used throughout all of the Oz books at least once, and is kind of common vernacular around the turn of the century to describe a individual person, which is the definition, and to tie back to the interconnectivity of it. There's a little nod that made me laugh. So I have a history with this series, and I kind of want to share some of the things I've learned and make it easier. There's no real videos like this, so I'm going to kind of go over the publication. So the very first book in 1900 was published under a copyright separate from the other books. So originally, the Copyright Act of 1830, which provides a 28 year before it goes into the public domain. So to define the term the public domain that we're going to be talking about a lot in this video, that's when something gets free access to anybody to publish or use the content. So once it expired in the 50s, any publisher or any book company or anybody has the ability to take that book and do with it, make your own movies of it, make your own books of it, sequels with the same characters, publish the same book in many different publishers. And that's kind of what I'm going to go through. There's not a lot of evidence. I've done a lot of research. If you know anything, please send it my way, but I'm going off of Wikipedia and a few other sources, the International Oz Club and other things that I've been looking just to see the lineage. So my collection of the books are not complete. There's about five to six I need to really get everything going to where I want the collection to be, and then I'll make another video going more detailed, and I'll have more time to do more research if one happens to find any. So when the first book, the Copyright Act, changed in 1909, allowing a 28-year renewal for a total of 56 years of the copyright. And so it was published in 1900, and it entered the public domain in 1956. So the publisher Riley and Lee, original publisher from that point, from L. Frank Baum when he was writing, all the way through, they made 40 books, a lot of times called the Fabulous 40. He did the first 14 and then 2 side books that connect into it. And then he was continued by other authors under the copyright of Oz, owned at that time by the publisher Riley and Lee. So I got example here. Here's a 1933 Riley and Lee. This was when the design began in the 30s. This one I think probably is either late 30s or early 40s. There's no dating in it at all, but the binding's kind of worn, but still beautiful illustrations. And is in a really good condition. It was given to me by a longtime family friend. It's one of my favorites in my collection, probably the oldest one I have. It goes back to the 40s. So this is the only one I have under the Riley and Lee publisher. And they had the characters on the spines and the publishers at the bottom. And that's one way you can date the older books. So this is the second book in the series, originally titled The Marvelous Land of Oz, shortened by the publisher to The Land of Oz. And that's another way you can use for dating. Same where the first book is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. So after the copyright expired, there is many publishers. This is from HarperCollins Books of Wonders in print. This is the first book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Some printings are just Wizard of Oz. And same beautiful illustrations. The illustrator for this is separate from the illustrator of the other 13 books from L. Frank Baum. So it's W. Denslow did the illustrations versus John Neal for the later. Neal actually wrote 3 Oz books, part of the Fabulous 40. So when this was published, the second one was published in 1904, and it entered the public domain in 1960. So originally, the publisher, Riley and Lee, didn't have the copyright to the first book. Was published by another publishing company. So once that expired, once the copyright expired, it would move back to Riley and Lee. They were allowed to print it. Same with any other publishing company could print that first book once it was public domain. So they, from that point, they started releasing collections. So usually in the 30s and 40s, up into the 50s, the publisher would sell the series either in one lump sum or subscription. Different ways they would break it up. I don't have any of those. A lot of times when you see people with Oz collections, they have the series. They have all 14 from the same publisher, from the same time period, same binding. That's not what I'm interested in, and I started doing this, collecting these books with my fiance over a long-distance relationship. So I was able to have multiple copies of the same book, which I'll show you next. So once the Marvelous Land of Oz went into the copyright, over time, the copyright expansion was passed by Congress between 62 and 74, which expanded a lot of the books until 76 Copyright Act. So once in the 80s, all of them became public domain, and any other authors or publishers could use those rights. And all of L. Frank Baum's other non-Oz works, all his plays he's wrote, his musicals, his other books are all in the public domain since 1995. So I have only one of those in our collection, and it's from the same publisher. We got 2 from Dover. This is the Sea Fairies. So the characters from this later on appear in Oz books. The protagonist, Trot and Captain Bill, will later on appear in Oz books as part of the series. Going back to the beginning of the video of how he kind of consolidated them as a universe. Then I'm going to go through just the 14, and the other ones I have. I don't have the full, so I'm going to tell you the year they published and when they went to the public domain, and I'll show you which one I have. Some of them are easy to date, whereas this HarperCollins, the copyright of this publication was 87. So it seemed some better days got it used. So this was either 87 or one of the later releases, which released for about 5 years, so it's maybe from the 90s. So with the book copywriting for these books, a lot of times it's not a direct year, especially if we go back to the old Riley and Lee. You could have a original, book from 1904 of The Marvelous Land of Oz, and you may think it's one from 1924 because it's the same publisher, and the same similar binding, but you have to look for certain details because the dates are not readily written in the material. So then we have the third book in the series, released in 1907, Ozma of Oz. And I have a library copy that doesn't have a cover. So I don't have all the information for all this stuff readily available, but Del Rey released these paperbacks, which have the illustrations as well. But they're more portable. And Book of Wonder was these big ones with the dust jackets, big pictures, and many different. And I have one here from the International Wizard of Oz Club, and they released a series of these. So this is just a small look. I'm not going to go through the whole history here. That will be for the next video, but this will be the first of videos talking about Oz. Kind of wanted to... It's still... People still read these books. And Marvel released comics in the last few years, which redid the story in a new art style, but still the first 6 books were re-released. So, and here's one of the side books here. And this was from Skylark Publishing. So it goes pretty deep in publishing companies. If you're a publishing company, you probably release these books at some point because you don't have to pay anything to. So if you have any unique collections or any interesting videos or any, talking about Oz or just growing up with stories and how either it's collected in one or you get it piece by piece, what inspired you to kind of start thinking with your imagination? And this is what it did for me with these books. It transported me to a world of thought. And I remain there to this day. So thank you all. Much love and prosperity.